All right, everyone. So welcome to this third edition of the Southbound Resilience Webinars. My name is Arjuna Srinidhi, and I anchor the ECOBARI Collaborative. I'm very excited today because we have, I think, a very interesting session to highlight the synergies between biodiversity and conservation and the generation of resilient incomes for local communities. And I think a stellar lineup of speakers and case studies whom I will introduce in due course. Please note that this event is being recorded. This webinar also coincides with the second anniversary of ECOBARI. And so I would like to first call upon Skand Agarwal from the ECOBARI Secretariat to briefly introduce the collaborative and the host for today's webinar. So Skand, over to you.
Sure. Thanks. Just a minute. I'll just share the screen.
Yeah. So meanwhile, maybe I can also add that this webinar is as part of a series of webinars that we organize at ECOBARI called as the Southbound Resilience Webinars. The word Southbound Resilience, I think it refers to the particularly challenging context of the global South, meeting development targets while also ensuring that we do that in a sustainable way. So that's where the Southbound word comes from. And through these webinars, we hope to learn from the on-ground experiences of practitioners, discuss issues with experts, and foster collaboration for upscaling EBA in India and soon in the global South. So that was a bit of background to this series. So now that Skand is ready, I hand it over to Skand to introduce ECOBARI.
Thank you, Arjuna. You can hear me properly, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. So, hi everybody, and I welcome everybody to this webinar. And here we have another panel with the experts, and we have few speakers online as well. I'll just briefly explain who we are. So, a bit of a context to how ECOBARI came about goes back to 2019, when there were few subject experts consultation between water, TMG, different organizations on certain aspects such as biodiversity, agriculture, water. And what came out of those consultations was that several sectors have different needs and several different sectors have different ways of adapting to climate change. Yet we need an integrated sort of approach to adapt to climate change. And that's when, from local consultations with subject experts, we went towards sort of state level consultations with the government of Maharashtra. We had a few from government of India, from Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. So we had various different stakeholders together in a single consultation and discussing about what's the need, how do we actually put down a roadmap to upscale and promote ecosystem-based adaptation in Maharashtra. And during those consultations, when we concluded that we actually need a collaborative to all the stakeholders to come together in a single platform and collaborate to upscale EBA. So, I mean, ECOBARI comes from a long consultation between different stakeholders, so 2 or 3 years. And now it's a platform where we are trying to bridge the gap between government, NGOs, media, researchers, academia to upscale EBA. That's the whole background to how we were launched in 2021, 19th November. As I said, so there were several different kinds of organizations who came. These are few of them. These are actually the founders who actually founded ECOBARI in the start in 2019. As you can see, there are different kinds of organizations. We have a financial-based organization. We have academia like ISD. We have Bharatiya. Then we also have networks such as Eco Network. We also have research institutions like SOPECOM, TMG, C4ICRAF. And we also have the main promoter and convener of the entire secretariat, which is WOTR and W-CReS. While we were seeing that there is a lot of gap and isolation between different kinds of stakeholders in terms of upscaling EDA, and promoting it, we actually landscaped what are the potential actors and stakeholders that can help us to upscale EBA. So we have media, government, as I told, NGOs and researchers, and this is our main kind of audience we want to capture in terms of who can come together, the same vision of upscaling EBA, which is ecosystem-based adaptation to climate change. But all the while keeping a main primary stakeholder, which is the local communities and the villages. Then this is just to put it there out there in the slide, our vision and the mission. Just very briefly, the mission of ECOBARI is to be a sort of one-stop platform where all the people across India and possibly South Asia who believe in ecosystem-based adaptation as an approach to adapt to climate change can come together and help people and communities adapt to upcoming impacts of, or already impacts of climate change. Then we have been working very we had very scrutinized process of taking in different kinds of organizations within the collaborative, and over the 2 years, we have very slowly expanded to a few organizations who are within India right now. So as you can see, we have Cool the Globe, which is sort of a very upcoming, new energy, young kind of a organization working towards carbon credits and emissions. Then we have organizations like Digital Bean, Ramika, Samruddhi. So Digital Bean and Samruddhi work more towards the technical aspect, say digital technologies in agriculture and climate resilient agriculture. Then we also have a few practitioner organizations, on-field organizations such as IFHD, CTRD, Ramika, Yuva. And amongst all, we also have a few individual experts, as you can see, Dr. Sunil Goyal and Devraj, who are also collaborating to this collaborative. Just to give you a context, how we as ECOBARI, the host of today's webinar, work, we have 3 action cells, as you can see. One is ecosystem development, which we also call platform development, just not to get confused. Then we have principle development, knowledge generation. Very briefly, platform by ecosystem development or platform development, we mean that ECOBARI as a collaborative can expand and influence through policy advocacy and membership drives. And this also entails that we increase the engagements in sectoral events through webinars such as this. Then we have principle development. Now this deals with the whole idea of ecosystem-based adaptation, EBA, and upscaling through tools and pedagogies. What we envisage is that we come up with training programs. We are already in the process of actually building a training and capacity building programs, which can help build capacities of different kinds of stakeholders, say from rural communities to NGOs to researchers to government. And then lastly, we have knowledge generation, which deals with basically disseminating the whole idea of whatever we're working, which is EBA. And we are doing this through sharing the best practices, gathering case studies, evidences through monitoring and evaluation process. And just to give you a context, all the organizations and the members which are part of ECOBARI work in one of these cells together and help it sort of go it forward. So this is a very brief review of what we've done in the past. As you can see, so this is our flagship event, which we call it Southbound Resilience Webinar, and we have had 2 sessions in June, starting in June, and then in August. Both of them have had different kinds of topics to discuss. One was on EBA and agriculture, one was on water governance and EBA, and this, which is the third, which also coincides with our anniversary, will deal with more on biodiversity conservation and sustainable livelihoods. Then we also had different kinds of trainings and capacity building events, such as resilient incomes training. We have had CRA, which we call climate resilient agriculture training. We have had farm ponds training. We also had as you can see, Eco Network is one of our members, and we collaborated with them to implement the SAGE fellowship program between June and October 2023. This was a product of expert dialogues last year. We also had similar kinds of film screening. So this context is to give you that the event, whatever we do, is not very mainstream, only research oriented, but kind of different ways of looking at EVA and understanding it, promoting it. Then this is a context for planned and upcoming projects, just to give you an idea that, as I told you, that we are also in the process of building this EBA training and capacity building certificate course, where we're going to look at EBA in a very comprehensive manner. We've seen that there are other courses on EBA as well online, but are very much theory based. This is where we're going to look at more practice-based EBA. How do we implement it? What are kinds of tools and tools that we need to implement it on the ground? So we'll see different kinds of components, say from biodiversity, adaptation, water. Then we have a very interesting knowledge portal coming up where we are sort of collating all the good studies and best practices of EBA all across India for now. This is going to be scrutinized and evaluated by, of course, industry experts before we put it on the portal. But it's a one-stop portal where you can come and read more about EBA. Then we have, as I told you, SRW is one of our flagship. We also are upcoming. We also planning to come up with EBA education program for corporates, which is much more sort of making corporates aware in terms of why ecosystem-based adaptation is important, which is also a feedback loop for them to actually go on the ground and implement it later in the future. And then very simple, because we are a portal which talks about EBA. We're gonna talk. We also are coming up with thematic-based, easy to digest EBA content. We understand that EBA can be quite a bit jargon. It's difficult to understand on the first go. So we are trying to come up with very easy to digest kind of a content for you to understand how do we go about it. Yeah, that was in terms of past events, future events, and who we are, how did we come. And just I would like this opportunity to also tell you that we are very much open in terms of applications for our membership, and we have our own website, which I'll put on the chat for you to go and log on to. This is just a small preview that we have a membership form out there which you can fill, and it takes about a month for us to sort of go through it, evaluate it. We have a steering committee which actually takes a bit of a time to understand what kind of organization are you, who you are, if you are an individual expert, who you are, how much of experience do you have, and how potentially you can collaborate. That's the essence of being a member. So as much as you are willing to upscale EBA, we all for it. So this is a preview, and then just to ask you to also engage with us. We are very new, but we are very upcoming, and we want more and more engagement from the audience who wants to understand EBA. We also have just a perk of we have several perks of being a member. If you're a member, in terms of collaboration, collaborative opportunity, getting to know different kinds of like-minded organizations coming together. But we also have a kind of interesting, we call it the Barista newsletter, which is sort of member-exclusive newsletter bi-monthly, where we come up, we show what activities we are doing, or you can also share your activities, what you are up to, how you can collaborate, and different kinds of events related to EBA. We have a Twitter platform, and then where we also engage with a lot of audience, which you can always check it out. There. We'll share everything, all the links on the chat. We'll also share the slides with all the participants in case you want to know more about us. But we have a website, you can go check it out. We also have a contact us page. And then we also have Twitter. We have a form for membership. We'll share everything on the chat. So yeah, thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thanks a lot, Skand, for that introduction to who ECOBARI is and what ECOBARI can offer to potential members and current members. So with that, let's get into the session. And it's my honor at this moment to introduce Dr. Bharucha, who will be moderating today's session. Dr. Bharucha, as many of you would know, especially in this sector, in addition to his vast medical experience, he has been active in wildlife and nature conservation for nearly 50 years. He's been a member of a number of institutions such as the Bombay Natural History Society, World Wildlife Fund for Nature, World Wildlife Institute of India, and he heads the Bharati Vidyapeeth BVIR as a director for the Environment, Education and Research Department. Most importantly to us, he is a dear friend of WOTR and also a part of ECOBARI steering committee. So welcome, Dr. Bharucha, and you will be hearing more from Dr. Bharucha soon. We have several other very distinguished guests and speakers whom I will introduce one at a time, so we don't overwhelm you with too many introductions. But to present the first case study, I'm very excited to invite Kritika Ravishankar and her organization, Farmers for Forests. So overall today you will be hearing, so just a brief mention of the agenda for today, you will be listening to 3 very compelling presentations on topics such as leveraging carbon credits, operationalizing access and benefit sharing, empowering biodiversity management committees, so forth. And following this, you will have, you'll see a very interesting panel discussion that will feature subject experts and practitioners, culminating in a bit of a Q&A around to engage other audience as well. So first up, we have Kritika. As I mentioned, Kritika has spent over a decade working in rural India and Africa across sectors like public distribution system, health, agriculture, forests, with institutes like the World Bank, Poverty Action Lab. She has a degree in economics and environmental studies from Mount Holyoke in Massachusetts, and continues to be fascinated about how the two can interact better, which is exactly what we are also very interested in at ECOBARI, Kritika. So really looking forward to hearing from you. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me. So I think today I'm just going to briefly talk about how we can use or leverage the carbon markets to provide a source of climate resilient livelihoods to the farmer community. Just to give you a brief overview of what we at Farmers for Forests do, we primarily work on 2 different types of land, which is we work on forest land and then we work on agricultural land. And the idea is to help communities and farmers really manage these lands and leverage them in a way that biodiversity is improved, carbon is sequestered, other ecosystem services like improved soil health, more water holding capacity of the soil, all of that comes through. And at the same time, farmers are also able to get a good financial return from doing this. Because in a lot of the work that we've done and in a lot of the literature that we've reviewed around the world, we've realized that if we are able to sort of link the financial incentives for farmers with restoration, I think that leads to a lot of long-term benefits and sustainable efforts. So I'll just briefly talk about, this is a very long presentation, so I'm going to skip through a lot of it and talk only about what is relevant to our work, especially the work that we've been doing with farmers on agricultural land. So like we've seen, conventional agriculture is not climate resilient. A lot of the farmers that we're working with were facing crop losses, declining yields, primarily because of extreme weather events, erratic rainfall patterns, and also because of just, excessive use of fertilizer, etc. So, one answer to this could be transitioning farmers, at least on a part of their land, to agroforestry models. So multi-layer agroforestry, where you're doing several different crops along with trees, etc., is one good solution, because not only is it better for the land, it is also more climate resilient than doing monocropping of like sugarcane or soybean, etc. So while the answer was fairly clear, and this is something that lots of other institutions, governments have been trying to promote, I think the biggest sort of challenge with this is that for farmers, the capital investment upfront is very high. So just to give you an example, on an average, if a farmer has to transition to agroforestry on 1 acre of land, depending on the species, etc., that can cost the farmer anywhere between like 50,000 rupees to 75,000 rupees per acre, which includes the sapling cost, the organic fertilizer cost, the drip irrigation cost, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the other biggest problem in transitioning to a system like that, apart from the high capital investment, is also that typically a farmer will have to wait for at least 4 to 5 years until the farmer is able to harvest agroforestry produce. Plus, it requires some amount of knowledge in terms of species and what different species to crop together, what kind of organic fertilizer to use, et cetera, which again has been a big deterrent. So this was when we were trying to convince a lot of farmers to move to agroforestry, these were sort of the main challenges that we came across. And just to give you some context, we're currently working with about 1,000 farmers on this project across 2,500 acres of land and across 4 districts of Maharashtra, both in the Vidarbha region, which is Gadchiroli, Gondia, and then also in the Marathwada region. We're working in Ahmednagar, Bid, and the Pune district. So this is our experience from working with 1,000 farmers across these areas. So these were sort of the main problems that they were facing. And we essentially figured out a way of, how do you kind of solve these problems for the farmers so that they can transition to all of these things. So essentially what we found in the first case is that if you can use philanthropic grants, which is what we're doing, so CSR money, money from foundations, as well as government schemes. The government already offers a lot of subsidies for things like saplings, drip irrigation, etc. If we can converge the two to create a high quality project, which is subsidize the cost of the implements for farmers. So now farmers in our program pay only 10% of the cost, whereas 90% of that cost is covered through philanthropic grants, schemes, etc. And we found this, so in the early years, we were actually giving a lot of the farmers weren't even paying the 10% money. We were doing a lot of this for free. But I think what we realized is when you do everything for free, you often get people into the program who aren't really interested or who aren't really convinced about the program. So this 10 to 15% payment from farmer and then having the rest covered either through philanthropy or through government schemes, I think has worked out really well for us. So the cost for the first 4 years, which is essentially the transition, and what we're also able to do through this money is also provide farmers with income for the first 4 years. So essentially how it works is that while they're transitioning and while the revenue starts, because that, if you see, is a major challenge for farmers, right? Like what do you don't have a reliable source of income for the first 3-4 years after you've transitioned. So providing farmers with cash transfer and financial support during those 3 to 4 years has seen farmers really take up the program, as well as invest a lot of their time and effort into doing this. And this point was particularly important for us because, ultimately, if you want that work to be sustainable in the long term for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, etc., the farmers being invested in that is very important. And so the question that came up for us was that, okay, so we have the money and everything covered for the first 3 to 4 years. How do you ensure farmers continue to get financial support for this for the next maybe 15, 20 years? And I think that's where carbon finance can play a major role. So essentially what carbon financing is that when you're planting trees or when you're transitioning to more regenerative forms of agroforestry or agriculture, you are sequestering a lot of carbon in the trees as above ground carbon, in the roots and shoots as below ground carbon, and then also in the soil as soil carbon. And different companies around the world who have made net zero commitments, who have made sustainability commitments, are willing to purchase these carbon credits in the voluntary carbon market in order to kind of meet their own commitments. So essentially how it works with farmers in our program, and I'm just going to skip the history part because we don't have a lot of time, but essentially how it works for farmers in our program is that we are able to, once they've transitioned to agroforestry for the first 3 to 4 years, we then use a lot of drones and satellite data to essentially be able to accurately estimate how much carbon has been sequestered in the trees, in the soil. Along with that, we also look at other ecosystem services that the land is not now providing. So everything from, what is the additional biodiversity that has come on the land, how much water is being saved as a result of this, is microbial species like, bacteria, nematodes, all of that, is there an increase in those species in the soil? So we're able to collate all of this data and essentially come up with a value of how much carbon is sequestered and then what are the other ecosystem and nature benefits. And these carbon credits can then be sold in the market. There are primarily two kinds of markets: a mandatory market, which is the largest of which is in Europe. But all of the work we do is in the voluntary market, which is with companies that are, like I said, that have certain commitments, etc. So we're then able to sell these credits in the voluntary market. And essentially what that means is that farmers, so the first 4 years of support we're able to provide, but now through the carbon market, farmers are able to get support and money not just for 4 years, but typically for 30 years, which is the life cycle of these projects. Just a very brief thing on the voluntary markets, just so that, if anybody has any questions. Essentially, the markets are primarily run on a voluntary basis, which is that there is no regulation mandating that these companies buy the credits. But they typically look at all sorts of activities across climate mitigation, biodiversity protection, etc. The different stakeholders of the VCM is primarily companies, and then project developers, which can be NGOs, which can be for-profit organizations, a whole bunch of these things. And how it works in a very quick way, because we don't have a lot of time, is that all of the data that we collect, we then provide to a third-party carbon standard. So that is data on what are the tree species planted, data on land records, data on dates of plantation, how many trees have survived, all of those things. All of this is then verified independently, both through the drone imagery that we provide and through satellite data and through on-ground field visits. And based on that, we are essentially able to come up with a number on, how much is the carbon sequestered, but then there's also a lot of qualitative information on what is the benefit to the farmers and communities from it, what are other things like biodiversity improvement and soil health. And based on that, you're essentially able to get a price for these credits. Now, prices for these kind of projects vary quite widely. So for agroforestry projects in the market right now, you're getting anywhere from $4 to about $35 a ton. And it really depends on the kind of quality of information, the species, all of those things that we're able to provide. The market size of the voluntary carbon credit market is about $2 billion in 2000. This was from 2021. The market is currently undergoing some fluctuations and is actually in what we call a bear market right now. So the market has crashed a little bit in the last 6 or 7 months. But generally, it is expected that the market for carbon, the market for other ecosystem services, including water, including biodiversity, is pegged to increase, albeit slowly over the next couple of years. And I think from what we've noticed, the biggest challenge with scaling this market is essentially ensuring that land records are clear and that there is no exploitation in terms of land and things like that. But also primarily things like measurement of this is done correctly, because otherwise you can just indulge in greenwashing. So this is again, like I was saying, there's different types of ways of capturing carbon. We primarily fall in the afforestation, reforestation category, and these prices are slightly outdated. But like I was saying, the prices right now are anywhere between $4 a ton to about $35 a ton. I'm just quickly going to talk to you about Skand. How much time do I have?
I have a couple of minutes to wrap up, Kritika. But
Okay,
you can also come back. We'll have more time during the Q&A part, so where some of the other details might come up.
Okay, great. I just wanted to quickly talk about how some of this is monitored, because I think that is important. And I think that at least for our project, the satellite imagery and the drone bit that we're able to do, I think that has really allowed us to provide a level of transparency that is unprecedented in a lot of these projects. So I just wanted to talk briefly about this. Here, essentially, you can see a satellite image which is showing deforestation happening. So unlike before, when a lot of these things were very hard to track, we're now able to see in real time deforestation happening. We get satellite data updated, high quality data updated almost every few days, depending on cloud cover and things like that. But even more than that, because satellite data will show you deforestation probably at larger scales. But here in the kind of projects we do, you're looking at smallholder farmers who have 1 acre of land, or sometimes half an acre of land. So it's very hard to be able to spot that, especially for newly planted saplings. It's very hard to be able to spot that through satellites. So I think that's where we were able to do a lot of work, good quality work with drones. So essentially what you can see here through the drone, what we're able to do is we're able to get data on very, very small trees. So here you can see these are newly planted saplings. Some of them are as small as 2.5 to 3 feet in height. But the algorithm is able to detect these, able to measure their height. And that essentially is, this sort of information is extremely valuable in being able to calculate carbon sequestration, because carbon sequestration is essentially a function of the height of the tree, the diameter of the tree, and the density of the wood. So in a lot of our projects, we're able to use drones to be able to detect these things at a very high quality. I think that's primarily it from my end.
Yes.
And it was
Sure.
great being here. Thank you.
No, thanks a lot, Kritika. That's really fascinating, because this is a very challenging area. Many organizations, many institutions are trying right now, engaging and trying to crack this beast of trying to make the carbon markets work for communities. And your institution provides a model of how, although challenging, it has struck some success. So I'm sure we'll come back to you with more questions. We have some foresters and biodiversity experts and all also in the audience. But with that, we'll move to the next presentation. Next up, we have Dr. Amit Setia, who is the founder of Cranes, an NGO that is very active also in a similar area in Gadchiroli and adjoining districts. Recently, he was selected as the youngest non-officio member of the Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board. In 2021, he's also an assistant professor at the Mathurdas Mahota College in Nagpur. Dr. Amit, we look forward to hearing about your experience. Over to you. We have about 10 minutes to finish. Yeah.
Thanks for notifying. I'll try my level best to finish it in time.
Thank you.
Namaskar. Warm good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon. Yes, you can.
You are audible.
Yes. And your slides are coming up, yeah. Yes, Amit.
The screen is visible?
Yes, the population growth slide is there, yeah.
Yes. So during the history of the earth, the most devastating things we have seen is the rise in human population. In the beginning, we were very few, but now we have reached up to certainly the highest of our population numbers. And this is the most devastating things in the history of earth. And we have seen during this rise in the population, during the name of the so-called Vikas and development, we have lost the natural resources. As the slide you can see, we have lost almost half of the forest we had in the past. We have lost the tremendous and useful biodiversity. And to overcome this, now in say in the last few decades, the race of the human development has come up to a situation where we need to think on the sustainable solutions. And the most important thing what we can do is nature conservation through the sustainability. And it won't be a responsibility of any single organization, some individual person or some ignited souls. It is the community's responsibility to take up the challenge and to manage all these natural resources. So good afternoon, one and all. Myself, Dr. Amit Setia. I am the founder of NGO Cranes and now working as an assistant professor in the Department of Botany at Sri Mathura Das Mohta College of Science, Nagpur. So I'm going to present my case study in Gadchiroli district, where I have been sanctioned a project from GIZ, where we have worked on the 5 pilot BMCs in Gadchiroli district. In these 5 pilot BMCs, we have worked around some 13-14 villages, which were all the community forest right villages, where the natural resources and their forest boundaries were managed by the Gram Sabhas and the communities. So the major objectives of this study was to make the people aware of the Biodiversity Act 2002, their sensitization. The most important and challenging part is to prepare their biodiversity register, inventorizing the bioresources, then sustainable harvesting, finding the trade, making a trade, and then informing the state biodiversity boards to make a proper channel where further the levy fee and access and benefit sharing can be implemented, and further finding the maintaining the records, and in between the Gram Sabhas, the synchronization between the various village development committees. So the sensitization was very challenging for us. As we know, the people in Gadchiroli district, where it is heavily forested, and the second or the first primary income source is their farmer field, and then second is the forest. So the people used to be kind of busy in their own calendar throughout the year. So we don't find any suitable time to go and interact with the communities. And then they have their own schedule, then they have their own system, and they hardly trust on the other people's to come and interact with them, and to have a word of dialogue with such kind of complicated issues like the Biodiversity Act and the PBR. But fortunately, we studied, we stumbled in the primary time, and then we have decided to go to the people in the time when they have the time. So we targeted their social gatherings, we targeted their Gram Sabhas, and we have a very special day in the local called as Polo. So Polo is the day where these people take a local holiday, where all the people gather at one religious place and talk and discuss about their some rituals. So we found that particular time to reach and connect with the communities, and in this way we were very successful in sensitizing the communities. And then the second part came, that the installation of BMCs. So we installed the BMCs in all pilot villages, in all pilot Gram Sabhas. So in that pilot project, we have installed 5 BMCs. And then in the second phase, we have worked around 50 BMCs in Gadchiroli, Gondia, and Chandrapur district. Then the most tedious part come here is the data collection. As I already told you, the people are busy in their own calendar, they hardly get the time. And secondly, this won't happen in the beginning, that people will come and sit together and then they will readily involved in the process of making this PBR. So we need a catalyst, we need the NGOs like Cranes, or we need the educational organization, or we need some individuals who can go and coordinate with the communities and make the PBR happen. So we have observed that the people are busy in their field, so we targeted the field, we have made the team, we communicated with them, and in all 3 seasons, the rains, winters and summer, the 3 seasons have 3 different types of flora and fauna on the ground. The people are with their own insight of the data and the biodiversity information. We have tried and connected with the communities, and then we have collected the data. So this process went on for a year. So after a year, we got a proper data. Some challenges and opportunities to be discussed is the reluctance of the people. They have a busy timetable, and the very important part of this process, that while preparing the PBR, the communities who are involved in the processes are not paid. So the services provided by the community, although agreed that this is the activity which is carried by the community and it is for the community, so they have to take charge of their duties. But yes, it is absolutely free of cost thing. So that is one another challenge we faced. The poor funding from the government agencies is a very big problem. Technical support is a problem. We have seen during the past 3 years the very poor technical support we have, because all these activities, the PBR preparation activities, need tremendous technical support, and we need to have the flora and fauna expert for these. And then we have seen the legal overlapping. In the end, I'll be talking about this legal overlapping, as the area where we have did this is there are 2 laws. One is the Indian Biodiversity Act, another is PESA, and third is the Community Forest Right Act 2006. So these are legal and law overlapping, where the same resources are covered with 3 different laws. So this is a problem. And then poor support system from the government. And then on the opportunities, yes, it is a great thing that community should prepare their own PBR, as they get a tradable list of bioresources from that, access and benefit sharing. And under the Biodiversity Act, section 41(3) says that they can implement the levy fees, because we have seen in the ABS there were so many normal traded commodities were excluded from that access and benefit sharing component. But levy fee is the one which the local communities can readily implement, and we have seen some excellent studies from that. So during the course of time, we established a harmonious relationship with the communities, and then we have evoked them to understand and get the information about the different bioresources. Because I tell you, in the beginning of the process of PBR, the people were able to tell just 10, 14, 15 plants. But in the end of the process of the PBR, we have succeeded to inventorize about 400 plus plant from each individual BMCs. And it is a great number in terms of mapping, in terms of biological resources enlisting and inventorization. And not only the plant identification is important, but trading of the plant is also important. This is one very interesting plant, and a very remarkable thing. This plant is Trichosanthus cucumeriana. We have seen during the process of PBR process documentation, we came across this plant. It is a climber, and it is like a weed and almost of no use to the local communities. We have documented this. We have shared the list of some plants with the local traders, and the trader come up to us and say that this is Sanskrit patol patra and we require it in huge quantity. Some doctor in the discussions can know the use of this plant. This is Ayurvedic adulterant and indeed a very good medicine for several Ayurvedic preparations. So the trader want it as a patol patra. Local people called it as padora, but no one were on the same page. So we as a technical expert, we brought them in the same page that this plant is Trichosanthus cucumeriana. Yes, it is patol patra in Sanskrit. It is padora in their local language, and it is required in huge quantity. So we convinced the people, we convinced the primarily the women are very active in the processes. So we convinced some bachat gut to go and collect the plant, but the rate were not fixed. So we communicated with the women that how many amount they want. So they told us that we don't know all these calculations, but we know one thing: we require one wage, and one wage is around 200 rupees. So we communicated with the trader. So he told us that in a day 4 kgs of material can be collected, and the 50 rupees a kg can be cost determined. So we communicated on the both side, and we decided to get the things happen. So we trained the women in terms of this sustainable collection activities. Then the material was dried scientifically and then collected and then traded. So in the whole processes, not only the PBR was prepared, not only the BMC was established, not only the people were sensitized, but the trade happened. And this is the most appreciable and the most achievement, the most prominent achievement for all of us, that we were able to make the trade. So during the trade, there is things which need to be understood by the people, that the BMC is the management committee, whereas the other committees which are in order to make the things happen or the trade. So we have Pesa Gram Sabha Kosh, we have joint forest management committees, we have Gram Sabhas, and even the Bachat Gat, which can do the trade. So there is a synchronization established between the communities, and we were succeeded to get the trade. And then this is a very primarily and a simple presentation that how the access and benefit sharing can be conveyed to the communities, and how this can be put in a cycle, put in a circulation where the funds can be drawn from the BMC. Then how the operational and collection community will implement the levy fee, how the traders will be approached, and how the traders will be convinced, even though that after the procuring, after the purchase, you need to pay 3 to 5% of the ABS on that. And the Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board, in this case, is informed by the BMC that we have made this trade. They simply shared their bills like this, as you can see in this.
Request to wrap up soon, Dr. Amit.
Yes. It is about to wrap up. So we have we can see the bill, and this bill can be sent to the State Biodiversity Board along with the information of the bioresources we have traded. We have found these good practices, that we painted some walls in the cream location of the village where number of people go and come. So we used to write the requirement by the traders, and then you can see the trade happened. The post PBR activities is also important. Rather that, as I have told, that in the beginning of the processes, the people were very short of data, but in the end of the PBR, we have documented around 600 plus life form in the PBR. We have tried to establish a dialogue with the community, that how the bioresources can be managed, how their sustainable utilization is done, and how it can be further go into the processes of making all the things. We have a very fine example of this BMC Chicholi. This whole BMC actually was composed of all the women. The idea came up with the brilliant mind of Ashita Mukherjee. She suggested that why not to go with a committee which is all governed by the women, as they were very active in the processes. And this BMC actually is the pioneer from the Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board to got the nomination for Indian Biodiversity Award 2020. And not only nominated, it got special mention among the 3 biodiversity management committees in India. And lastly, I like to sum up with the things that in the whole process, in the whole thing, we need catalyst. The catalyst could be NGO, the catalyst could be some enthusiastic person, and the government, state biodiversity board, or the Jilla Parishad also can be the catalyst. And they need to play the role. We need to put the fund in the processes, and this is the only way where we can ensure the sustainable utilization of the bioresources, the conservation of biodiversity, and the sustainable income to the communities. And thank you, patiently listening me. A special thanks to Skanji for connecting me, and Shreyash Bhartiya ji, Ashita Mukherjee, Dr. Prashant Barne, my principal Dr. Jeevan Dontulwar, and Ashwajit Fuljale. And lastly, our team Cranes. It is all the collective effort of all these team members that we were succeeded to get the things done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amit. It's a really inspiring presentation from your side. I mean, the efforts to build the capacities of the BMCs, not just for sensitization, but also taking them through to a stage where there can be levy fees and trade can be initiated, is something which is goes beyond what many people have done. Congratulate you on that, and we'll also come back to you with more questions.
Thank you.
We finally move on to the third presentation. And here I would like to start by saying that, at ECOBARI, one of the things we're very keen about is that our collaborative doesn't just end up as another network for environmentally conscious NGOs and research institutes. Scaling up solutions means that it should be economically interesting and bring in the involvement of private companies. So representing this important sector today, we have Dr. Anita Chowdhury from Valagro Biosciences, where she is the research manager in the area of sustainable agriculture with a special focus on microbial research. We are also honored to have with us Sanjay Kumar Tokala, the country manager of Valagro and an agribusiness leader for over 25 years. So I hand over to Dr. Anita and Sanjay for the presentation.
Thank you, Arjuna. Good afternoon to all of you. I hope you are able to, see our screen.
Yes, absolutely. Go on.
It's basically we are into Valagro. Valagro is a multinational company based out of Italy. Over 4.5 decades now, we have been into sustainable agriculture. So it's really, really great to be connected with people who are into this particular journey called sustainability, and more so it has to be a movement. And in India, Valagro Biosciences, the completely held Indian subsidiary of Valagro SPA, has been in existence for the past 8 years. We have our solutions in plant biostimulants, which are natural products, and biofertilizers, biocontrol, then LSA-based special technology, LSA-based micronutrients, and specialty water-soluble nutrition. And we are into, in India, in Peninsula, Central and Peninsula India, we cover around 40 to 50,000, farmers, and we are into 10 states. We are operational into 10 states. The last 8 years journey has been, fantastic, and more so in compliance with the, National Biodiversity Authority, wherein Anita and team have, actually did the entire groundwork. And I would like to, ask her to continue the presentation, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay. Good afternoon, all of you. And first of all, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to let you know about our experience with biodiversity. And as Sanjay said, we are into microbial research. So basically, what is when we looked into being a foreign entity, what is the need of the hour for before we start our research? And we have understood that there is a Biodiversity Act, and we have learned a lot about the Act. And then initially, we have applied to the National Biodiversity Authority. So we have seen different applications are there. The first step, what we have done is we have applied Form 1 for accessing our biological resources, and wherein we have identified some of the biodiversity rich spots from different geographical areas of India. And then around 9 villages we have identified, and different crops also we have mentioned there, particularly with a special focus on rich biodiversity. I mean, we have identified based on the places where exactly the microbial load will be high. So after that, we have applied and we could get approvals, around several approvals we have received with great hard work. And the model we have understood. Yes. We have received around 19 approvals for accessing the biological resources initially. And when we have approached state biodiversity, and we did not have many of the villages, it does not have biodiversity management committees as well. So we were instrumental in forming the committees, all those things. And then initially we spent a few years on research. We have accessed resources, different resources, and then isolated different microbes and screened for different characteristics, like you can see nitrogen fixation, phosphorus, zinc, and nutrient solubilization, as well as plant growth hormone production. So once we spent some time on research, and we have identified some of the best leads that are useful for product development research. And once we are ready for our research outcome, ready for a commercialization, then again we have approached Biodiversity Authority through a Form 1 application that is for benefit sharing component. And for commercial utilization, we could receive approvals for around 11 microbes, as you can see here in the screen, 10 bacteria and 1 is mycorrhiza. And we have received approvals. After receiving, again, we have spent some time on product development research, and then we have launched the 5 products in the Indian market, as you can see here. And next step, the benefit sharing component comes into picture, and based upon our, initially we have had levy fees and application fees as well. As you can see in the picture, the State Biodiversity Board of Telangana, they have distributed around 25 lakhs to all the villages as application fees. And next, once after launching the products in Indian market, based upon the turnover of the sales turnover, we have also paid royalty through royalty payment. As you can see here in the pic, for 1 year, we have paid around 1,94,500, something like that. And because of this model,
and this is a continuous process, from 2019 onwards. And we have been, successfully doing close to 4.5 to 5 crores of our business in biofertilizers, and whatever, as per this particular percentages, we have been able to give back to the farming community in those targeted villages.
So basically here the model what we have chosen is it comes under replicable mechanisms. So we are taking something from the nature and putting it back. So that's how the cycle ends. So the products category are basically biofertilizers, microbial biostimulants, and biocontrol agents. So here, once the government of India understood our model, we have successfully completed the ABS model, and jury committee has visited our location, our laboratory, and we have presented our case, and we were selected for an award. Yeah. And we have been awarded as India Biodiversity Awards in the year 2021. So,
and I'm proud to add that when we went to the NBA in Chennai, we understood that it was the first agricultural company, focusing on agri imports, which was awarded this, very prized certificate and an award. And we continue to be associated with NBA. And now, I would like to conclude in terms of we are part of now the Syngenta group. And Syngenta colleagues are also so proud of us in terms of this particular initiative. And you also would like to I'm sure that all of us are now getting sensitive and aware of the changes that are happening in agriculture in terms of how the companies are shaping themselves. They are not just isolated into crop protection or seeds or fertilizers, but now they are into biologicals as well. So major MNCs are doing that. Major domestic companies are also doing that. And I am sure that with the kind of wave or movement that has happened in Brazil, I'm sure that India will not be far behind. Maybe we should be seeing a lot of disruptions and in the right direction here. In combination with the crop protection, the biologicals also are forwarded.
Thank you, Sanjay. And basically, I would just like to highlight over here, India being the rich in biodiversity hotspots, and we could collect a lot of potential microbes. And we are also working on global projects. Several global projects. We have an opportunity to launch our products worldwide. That gives us a proud moment for us being Indians. And in addition to that, we have also involved in some of the capacity building programs of Biodiversity Act. Recently, the Assam Biodiversity Board officials, along with the BMC committee and along with our Telangana biodiversity officials, they have visited our facility as part of peer-to-peer group discussions, and we have had we have presented our case study to them, and we have also gone to one of our village that from where we have accessed resources, and where we have verified how our amount has been utilized over there, and particularly in one of the villages called Indrakaran, they have utilized our money in collecting some of the office furniture and benches everywhere. Some of the cement benches placed in everywhere beneath the trees so that villagers can sit, and then other things they have painted some of the biodiversity pictures all over schools and offices and all. So that's how we are still continuing to involve in all the programs. We have several applications, several projects going on still. That's all from these are some of the pictures, recent pictures wherein the Assam Biodiversity Board has visited our place. That's all from us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I hope we were in the 10 minutes limit.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks to both of you, Sanjay and Dr. Anita. And I think, it's interesting work. The number of such examples are few, but it needs to increase. And that's one of the things I think we should talk about more. How do we incentivize more of such things to happen? But we'll come to that later. At this stage, we have heard from three fascinating insights from practitioners, people who have been trying to implement some of these actions. It would be really, I'm sure you would all like to acknowledge that there is a need to embed such implementation practices in sound science for long-term sustainability. So to provide these kind of expert perspectives and the theoretical kind of context for this, the next session will be facilitated by Dr. Bharucha, whom I've introduced earlier. Dr. Bharucha is going to be joined in these discussions by a few really interesting panelists. There will be Dr. Mr. Nitin Kakodkar, who was the ex-Principal Chief Conservator of Forests from Maharashtra. Mr. Kakodkar is from the 1987 batch of the IFS and was in service for about 34 years, holding different positions, culminating as the PCCF and Chief Wildlife Warden of Maharashtra. We have Mr. Subhash Badwe, another very experienced forester who has a lot of interesting assignments related to social forestry and joint forest management committees, watershed development, and most importantly, has developed a model for grassland development, duly approved by the Forest Department of Maharashtra. We also have Dr. Kranti Yardi, currently a senior scientist at NGCPR, and over 25 years of experience in various teaching roles at the graduate and postgraduate levels on subjects like conservation biology, natural resource management, and environment education. We are also having two young, senior men and youngish researchers from the Waters Center for Resilience Studies, W-CReS, Dr. Vaidi Imran Khan, who has a PhD in ecology from Bangalore University and specializes in biodiversity conservation and natural resource management in drylands. We also have Dr. Saurabh Purohit, who specializes in natural resource management using geospatial techniques, and also has a PhD from FRI Dehradun. So welcome all of you to this section where we hear from our experts. But first, over to you, Dr. Bharucha, for your own inputs, your own address, and then you can call upon the experts one by one for their remarks. Dr. Bharucha.
Thank you very much, Arjuna, for this introduction. I think of this as a sort of startup to something which is very new at WOTR and ECOBARI. So I'm very thankful that you organized this and something that was always close to my heart and never actually reached there, which is how are we going to live with this climate change? It's going to go on for the next several decades, and we really don't know how we are going to address it. So much of this is a think tank. Much of this, we are looking for inputs from the audience to tell us how they approach this and what they think about it. And the various types of stakeholders will get it, which have to get involved in this. So I've been asked to give a sort of broad overview of this, and that's very difficult in a short period of time, but let's have a couple of slides. So the first thing is adaptation to climate change is living with climate change. And if you need to live with climate change, then we have to first look at the data that we need for living with climate change. And that is, what is the type of ecosystem, the structure, its composition of species, its functions as ecosystems, and this is what next is. So this is what we need to look at. We also need to look at what are we talking about. We have so many uncertainties. Do we look at this 1.5 degrees centigrade or 2.5 degrees centigrade or 5 degrees centigrade, which will be actually disastrous as we look at it today? We also need to look at the threats. What are the threats that are going to happen due to climate change, and where do we address those in terms of adaptation? We need to look at biogeographic zones for our country, very specifically the ecosystem, species, genetic diversity, and say, what will happen in this regard with adapting to climate change? How are we going to do this? And what are the current and the past comparisons that we have in terms of, for example, traditional knowledge systems, to understand how best we can address the adaptation to climate change and come up with some sort of decision-making as to how to do this. Of course, taking into account the final aspect of this, which is uncertainty. So if we are going to look at uncertainty and we say we don't have the right sort of data, then we've got to use the precautionary principle, because we certainly realize that our farmers realize, agriculturalists realize, animal husbandry people realize, fisheries realizes this, housing facilities, health, this whole air, water, soil business, the whole industrial setting. How are we going to adapt to climate change? Because it's not going to go away, even if we adhere to all 17 SDGs in the next few years. This is going to be very difficult anyway. So this is something that we need to look at. And we need to look at, therefore, impacts on climate change as a part of uncertainty. And this is, therefore, needing to look at futuristic civilization and saying, what will happen with forests? What will happen with grasslands? How are we going to modify agricultural systems, pasture lands? How are we going to live sustainable lifestyles within the climate change, which is already there? So this is something which we need to look at. I think the first thing we need to look at is how are we going to deal with forestry? The forest is going to change as biogeographic zones themselves will change with climate change and are already changing. So how are we going to address that? And this comes out of Rogers and Pawar's 10 biogeographic zones and multiple subzones, which are clearly an indication of what we will have to do for forestry next week, and looking, therefore, at the livelihood aspect of this. And I think this is where the crux of the whole thing of adaptation to climate change lies. How are we going to modify livelihoods so that we address climate change at the same point in time as being a fact of life? Next, please. So if you look at this map of agricultural zones, very interestingly, if you overlay that on the biogeographic zones, it's a perfect match. And this perfect match becomes something very fascinating. It means that our farmers and our animal husbandry people have understood this over many, many decades, many, many generations, to say how have they adapted to the existing climate change. But when we talk to, and we'll see this in the next few presentations, when we look at this from the farmer's angle, they know something about it, but they cannot link this to many other aspects. We talk about that. Next, please. So impacts of agriculture due to climate change will have to address a multiple sort of things. It's not only addressing temperature. We need to address things like extreme climate events that are going to happen. We need to address drought. We need to address floods. We need to look at crop diseases. We need to look at human health. These are the kinds of impacts that we are going to address, not just in agriculture, but in every part of facts of life. My very pet thing, unfortunately or fortunately, is looking at what was dubbed for us as wasteland. There is no such thing as wasteland, right? I mean, all this was really the pasture lands of our farming communities. And of course, they were the amount of grassland that we have, which is considered wasteland, is nearly half of the whole of the territorial mass of India. And this, therefore, we need to look at, and when we say we are looking at biodiversity through this adaptation, then what is going to happen to these species? What is going to happen to the agricultural crops that are actually growing there? Next, please. We also need to look at animal husbandry, which is also having to adapt later on to climate change. Next, please. And the various pastoralists that we have, right up from Ladakh downwards, to say, how are they going to address, for example, movements up and down the Himalayan pasture belt? These are things that we will have to adapt to, because that is going to change drastically in the near future. The next aspect of it is, how are we going to deal with fisheries? How are we going to manage the traditional types of fishers? How are we going to manage trawlers? And what are we going to bring into the focus of climate change, very much so in our river type of fisheries that are there? Next, please. Finally, Nitin, of course, is going to talk much more about this and the impact of forest ecosystems as ecosystems and the rare, endangered, and threatened species which are there. How are we going to address that through climate change? Or are we going to make this forest look like the degraded forest that you see in that slide? Next, please. Well, another small aspect of grassland ecosystems, and this has become a very big concern now for us, I think, in India. We are going to need these kinds of lands for a very important purpose, and that is addressing climate change through wind-powered plants, through solar plants. The solar plants are going to need huge areas of what thought of as wasteland, and now we understand that there were bio-rich grassland areas. Where are we going to get this? So what is going to be left of the natural grassland ecosystem once this whole thing has taken over this? Finally, what is going to happen, and how are we going to adapt our wetlands from small village ponds to large backwaters of irrigation dams, for example? The deltas, lakes that we have are all systems which in this whole aquatic ecosystem becomes very important from the point of view of biological diversity. Next, please. Finally, the coastal belt, as well as, very importantly, the islands. How is that going to affect as climate change progresses? This is probably going to be the worst affected ecosystem that we are going to have to support, and trying to adapt to climate change here is going to be very difficult. Finally, looking at the urban areas. And I think we need to appreciate that urban areas are equally closely linked to adaptation to climate change. I mean, the whole of the transport thing, the housing, the improved health facilities that we are going to need, the management of droughts and floods, which cause a huge amount of human suffering. And the worst affected are going to be children and elderly guys like myself. So this is something that we are now going to have to address. Next, please. Finally, how are we going to address this through a various number of sectors? The health sector, insect pests, for example, reduction of pollinators, the cultivars and animal health issues, industrial issues, and how are we going to handle that, and transport. What are they expected to do to adapt to the existing threat of climate change? Next, please. So here you get a very important thing, which is biodiversity loss. And I think this is my greatest concern, the loss of RET species, both in question of plants as well as animals, the biodiversity loss which affects ecosystem services, which is going to be a very desperate issue to look at in terms of adaptation. Finally, what are we going to talk about when we say eco-restoration will not only be restoration as it was, but restoration to adapt to climate change. And that is something that needs a lot of predictive knowledge. How are we going to change this kind of plantation activity or wetland activity which we are doing in terms of climate change? Finally, what do we learn from our traditional forest systems and wetland ecosystems with invasive species? This is going to be enormous. Some of these invasive species will spread extremely rapidly and lead to extinctions of our own species. How are we going to deal with that? And finally, what do we know from traditional knowledge systems? I think we know a lot from traditional knowledge systems. We need to learn from sacred groves and the sanctity of rivers and temple plants. We need to look at nature-based solutions from a cultural aspect as well. And you can see how Jivya Soba Mashe, who is one of the greatest tribal painters, brought in how his farmland was ecosystem dependent. And it's incredible when you look at each little motif in that painting that he has done, and sitting there and telling me how he deciphers this. And when I talked to him about climate change, he said, "Hota hai, roz sa hota hai." He said, every day it happens. So this is how we need to look at. And finally, nature-based solutions, which come from very many things. We need new climate action skills. We need to understand food preferences. We need to look at transport and energy. We need to look at tourism and say, how do you make sustainable tourism within this whole gamut of adaptation to climate change? Thank you very, very much. I think I must say to the audience that we want a lot of inputs from you to take this thing forward, to take this think tank forward as part of something that ECOBARI has done. Thank you very much, Arjuna, for having me here. It's been great talking to you, and I hope we'll see much more of this kind of activity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Bharucha. And Dr. Bharucha, I think you can also continue chairing the next part where you call upon Dr. Nitin, Subhash, Dr. Kranti, and others.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be doing this for these 5 speakers. They each have their own expertise, and I want them to, of course, bring in their own perceptions of what they want to do. They are all 5 very specialized people. I'm not going to pose necessarily specific questions. We want to open this whole forum with what expertise will be needed for adapting to climate change. So starting with Nitin, who's an old friend of mine. In fact, all 5 are friends of mine, so it's a little difficult to say. But this is what I think we need to bring in, this kind of knowledge base that they have into this whole part of adaptation to climate change. So Nitin.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bharucha, and thank you, WOTR, Arjuna, and all the others here. Thank you for having me here. Now, I have to squeeze in about 150 years of forestry into 5 minutes and more. So it's going to be really tough. But what I'm going to do is probably simplify things to the best possible extent so that it becomes easier to grasp the issue and maybe pose a lot of questions rather than posing solutions. Now, we are at a stage where we are at the risk of losing 50% of all land-based species in this century. That's a massive loss that we are facing. But while we talk about how forestry can be changed in the future, we also need to see what forestry has been over the last 150 years and more. Because, basically forestry worked on the principle of sustained yield in perpetuity. The entire science of forestry is sustained yield in perpetuity, on which all the forestry working systems have been based. Now, during the implementation part, how much did we succeed? Where did we fail? These are things to be understood. Because the basic aims of forestry right from the beginning have been production of higher volume per unit area. That was when we talked about or spoke about production forestry. Then also talking about superior quality timber. We all know that the Gadchiroli timber is part of Buckingham Palace dining table. And today Gadchiroli and Vidarbha timber is part of the Parliament building, and also probably in the Ayodhya Ram. So it has its own value. I mean, not probably deriding its value as timber or as a particular type of timber. But now we are not very fond of saying or blowing our trumpet about it, because we feel that no, this is far beyond timber. So and producing a lot of economically valuable species. Then we also need to understand what silviculture is. Simply put, silviculture is the art of cultivating a forest. Now, when we talk about cultivating a forest, it means an even-aged forest. What is a even-aged forest? Or rather, we call it a uniform forest, where trees of all age classes and all girth classes exist. So that is a uniform forest, and that is what is the ultimate aim of forest. But then we shifted from, it's not that no modification has been done. We shifted from the clear felling system to the shelter wood type of systems, to coppice with reserve systems, to selection come improvement systems. We started retaining what are called as snag and dent trees in the forest. We said that no felling along nalas and riverbanks. We started protecting the fruit trees and promoting more of indigenous species. We started talking about promotion of regeneration of species. So that was one of the most important things. And what Dr. Bharucha just said, removal of the invasive alien species, the IAS, not to be taken otherwise, but invasive alien species. And when we talk about bamboo, bamboo is one resource which we really should look at when we are talking about sustainability. That is one resource, and I think the first speaker, Kritika, she was speaking about it. And bamboo, and there are well laid out rules. When we resort to bamboo cutting, what should be followed so that the clump remains as such. So that is also something that we need to. While we talk about afforestation, there were waves of afforestation. We had the Subabul wave, and then we had the Acacia auricularis wave, and we have the eucalyptus wave, and not very long back we had the Gliricidia wave. All around Pune especially know about the Gliricidia wave. But now the focus has changed. So the focus has changed from exotic to indigenous plants in most of the plantations, or in mostly all the plantations. We are also now focusing on unique habitats like grasslands, like swamps, the Myristica swamps that we have in Maharashtra, the mangrove forests. Probably Maharashtra is the only state which has a mangrove cell or a coastal biodiversity cell in the whole country, and they've done excellent work. The amount of mangroves that has the area coverage has gone up tremendously, at least I think 10,000 hectares. Then we need to find out planting and maintaining native species which could be better resilient to climate change. So we need to find out answers to which could such species be. like Dr. Borucha said, there is a lot of unpredictability. We are not only talking about what we know today, but what obviously would be known maybe later. Monitoring changes in phenology could be one aspect that could be looked at as a research topic. It was flowering, Palas was flowering, say, February onwards. Now it is flowering December onwards or January onwards. Is that because of climate change? Is the migration of butterflies has it changed from a particular month to a particular month? So these are small things which can be easily monitored. So that is very, very, very important. We also need to look at a drier soil regime, because when we talk about increase in temperatures, and we are certainly talking about drier soil regime in the future. So we need to see what can be done. And what happens to production forestry in that case? We can't shut it off, because we then need to look at alternate sources of wood. Have we found that? So that is something which, while we talk about climate change, another aspect that I have been asked to touch upon. You wanted to say something?
Is at the camera.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes. While we talk about ways of financing ecosystem restoration services, we also have to find out that what has the climate change cost us?
Yes.
When we say, can we put in so much of money into forestry or wildlife conservation or biodiversity conservation? Let us also look at what it has cost us. What is the amount of money that we have lost, or the losses that we have sustained? We can also look at, tourism is a non-exploitative form of getting revenue for the locals. And we have proved that. And that sustainable tourism what can it achieve? And can we think about conservative working of the forest? By working of the forest, I mean exploitation to some extent, or removal of some forest produce to some extent, plowing back the revenue to the development of the local villages. So that we need their goodwill, we need their support. It is again what Amit was talking about, plowing back of the revenue. So that is also we need to think about. Man-animal conflict mitigation is something else that we need to seriously focus upon while we talk. It is a result of climate change to a certain extent. And one good thing that has happened is the Maharashtra is the only state which has a state wildlife action plan, which is approved by the government. It's approved by the State Wildlife Board. We have a National Wildlife Action Plan, but Maharashtra, which is a state-specific action plan, we have. And that has a chapter number 11, if you can lay your hands on, which talks about how to bring in money for all these activities. Yeah. So that is something we need to look at. So when we are talking about financing, yes, there are ways in which to finance. Carbon credit is one more. So, this is what I have to just tell you as probably some introductory remarks. But let's see how it goes forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nitin. That was excellent. I know this is a huge canvas for you, and we could have a whole session on just the forest part of this, which is, I think, important. So let's look at how we can do that. Our second speaker today is Subhash Badwe, and he goes back a long way with me, looking at grasslands, which are a major concern for me. And he really understands the species diversity of grasslands in terms of what we need to do. What do we do for people? What do we do for the wildlife there? And that is his very special expertise in terms of looking at this huge part of India, which needs that kind of expertise now, needs new type of researches to be done in terms of adaptation to climate change, which I think is so critically. So, Badwe, sir, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes.
Is that audible?
Thank you, sir. As our Kakodkar sir said, the history about the forest and the present situation, the same is the condition of grasslands. But as we have the forest policy, till we don't have the policy to preserve and to protect the grasslands and deserts. India has 5 types of especially grass cover types, and whole our this Deccan Plateau and the part of Gujarat and all this 17 lakhs and 40,000 square kilometer area that falls under the grass cover of Sehima dicanthum. These are the 2 climax grasses. As we maintain our forest as in a climax stage. Climax stage is the stage when we get the most of the production through that forest. So in forestry, we maintain the Tectona grandis in South India, then Shorea robusta in North India, then a pine species and a Cedrilla, Cedrus deodara in Himalaya. So likewise, we have to maintain the Sehima and dicanthum type of grassland in our present all degraded lands. In 1985, when the word Westland coined, that time the Westland of India was 156,000 square kilometers. But now it is only just 80 hectares, 80,000 square kilometers. This shows that there is a change in land use pattern because of agriculture conversion, then industrial area expansion, then extension of the villages and encroachments and all that. And because of this overgrazing and fire, our valuable grass species, they disappear. What happens in black cotton soil? The king of the grass is the our Dicanthum annulatum and all dicanthum species, and with their other species also. If you see the percentage of moisture, if it increases, then Dicanthum disappears and Ischamum pilosum that appears there. Even if the our moisture content increases, then this Ischamum pilosum will disappear and Ischamum rugosum and all that other species will come. Likewise, in our forest, if the these Sehima grasslands, they got the erosion by heavy rainfall, then this Sehima will disappear first, and then Chrysopogon fulvus it will appear. Even if the erosion continues, then Chrysopogon fulvus will ultimately disappear, and Heteropogon contortus, what we call as a spear grass, that's the black spear grass, I mean that appears, and it has very low fodder value. And likewise, we lose our valuable fodder in erosion. And now most of our grasslands of drought-prone areas, only Aristida species is there, which means the grassland is highly eroded, and now onwards, even if the erosion continues, the rock will expose. So we have to maintain these grasslands, and for that grassland, we need the proper education. We need this syllabus into our syllabus of forest officers, agriculture officers, even agriculture universities, and it should be training should be given to all the NGOs who are working in watershed development program. Many people think that we can restore the grasslands only by making a broadcasting of the this grass seed, but it is very difficult to restore the grassland with the grass seed. So we have to maintain the proper species there, and for that purpose we will have to make the proper nurseries, and then we have to restore the our grasslands. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Bhagavatam. And I know how good you are on the ground where that is needed, and trying to say, how are we going to save these residual grasslands? And it's great to have you here. And I'm sure you'll be able to take many of us out into the field. Our third speaker today is Dr. Kanti Agdi. Most of you would know her as somebody who specializes in the pedagogy of environment education, but also talks about now works at the Nauroji Godrej Plant Research Center, doing a large amount of things which are closely associated with adaptation, and trying to say what will be the future of these kind of different ecosystems and the mosaic of ecosystems that she works with. So Dr. Yati.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you so much for getting me here for this session. It's such a dear to my heart, this whole subject, all the three, which is climate change, ecosystems is something, ecosystems for biodiversity conservation, and the third is now sustainable development. And my experience with different stakeholders, been working for last so many years, and now especially working in last 2 years with Nauroji Godrej Center for Plant Research. What I've realized is, all these three things, three things, which is climate change, ecosystems, and including sustainable development, is something which people know very little about. They don't relate it to themselves many of the times. Climate change also, they do not relate them that I am responsible for it or I can do something for it. So this is something which is, which is very scary, I would say. And now we work, now when working with different stakeholders, including schools, colleges, rural and urban, both, managers, company managers, from company workers to managers to farmers and women community groups in the rural sector, basically. This is something which I have come to know, that it's so important to have education awareness for all the sectors, all the people in different stakeholders in the community, which would be. So when we do these, when we conduct these sessions for awareness sessions for, say, college students or for school students, what is most important thing, what we show is basically two different ecosystems in our area. One is a grassland ecosystem, arid grasslands which are there, and another is a water aquatic ecosystem which is there. And when we take them in the field, the wow factor which comes in all the sectors of people, all the different groups, is, it's the realization that how beautiful it is. And it's also important for them to understand, like they can, all of them are interconnected, especially when we talk about climate change. Healthy ecosystems are so, they are the most important things to be maintained, to take care of climate change, because, the whole system works. And it's important to have this whole ecological balance being maintained. So when we talk to this new science students or, postgraduate students, it's very little they know about it. Like, it's important, it's utterly important to know that they should, what are indicator species? How do you identify a healthy ecosystem? So what do you mean by a healthy ecosystem? Why do you need a healthy ecosystem? And these things become very, very important when you do the education thing with different groups. With the case of farmers now, what we are very much interested in doing is basically also looking at other options, like, for example, different crop varieties, millets, which are been actually not being taken care of. People are not growing, even the local farmers do not grow millets now, nor do they use it. Their whole consumption, which was so much in their daily diet, is also getting reduced. So for climate change, these revitalizing this whole farming system. And the importance also is very, very important, which we do demonstration plots and the things and the tubers which are there. And for the local community and other things, we also do, I mean, through the other education systems, education programs, we also look at alternative income sources which can come from the surrounding, what we say, in the surrounding ecosystem, that we also look at. So it would be nice that I would like to invite people to come and see the place so that some of the things can be looked at. And since we worked also on research part, what we have understood is making endemic, endangered and RET category, rare endangered species nursery, is such a big task. With climate change, the things are changing, and it's something which is very, very difficult to keep up. So thank you so much, and that's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Kanti. And there was one statement that you made, which I think was extremely, extremely important. And that is when you take people out there at the NGCPR in your nature trail, and you come back with how beautiful it is. And I think that we very often forget that how beautiful these ecosystems are and how invigorating they are. So apart from the science and the finance and all those aspects, I think this aspect of how beautiful these ecosystems are and what they therefore mean to you in terms of biophilia is so very critically important. So our next speaker is Dr. Imran Khan, and Imran will talk to us about his experiences and what is planned ahead for him in terms of looking after adaptation to climate change.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. We are at this moment, we are focusing on ecosystem-based adaptations. In this adaptation, ecosystem-based adaptations, largely we considered three major pillars. That is biodiversity, and then biodiversity, and second one is the participatory governance, and third one is adaptive capacity. In participatory governance, today I'll just I'll emphasize on how this children and youth are crucial in ecosystem-based adaptation. I'll emphasize in this part. As I mentioned, participatory governance is a key pillar in ecosystem-based adaptations. Whenever we are we are doing some kind of activities related to the ecosystem-based adaptation, that time we considered generally the elderly people will be participating in the most of the activities. Always we are missing, unfortunately, we are missing children and then youth due to different reasons within the rural area. We are missing. Why we need to involve these children and youth are because their children are to have a long-term impact. Children and youth are very crucial at any program, because they are the future custodians of our environment. That's the reason we should consider them as a key representatives, key stakeholders for this successful ecosystem-based adaptation events. And the second point is to have an environmental stewardship, future stewardship, and then we need to education means education and awareness programs are very crucial. And then third point is they are the behavioral change makers. And then because when we are considering this when we are considering children and youths, at that time we can focus on future strategies also, because they are very creative, and then they are very they are very creative, and then they're whenever they are doing some kind of activities, they will be change makers for future for future strategies. That's the reason we need to involve them. Besides to this, as Dr. Burgess has mentioned, that traditional ecological knowledge plays a crucial role in ecosystem-based adaptation practices. To carry forward this traditional ecological knowledge, these youth and children are crucial for this to carry this traditional ecological knowledge. That's the reason we need to focus much more on this children and youth while doing this ecosystem-based adaptation. Another major crucial part is that, generally this is like, this will happen each and everywhere. Until we'll get some kind of benefits, we won't, some kind of benefits, we won't do any kind of activities. This is our human behavior. What kind of benefits should we give it to children and youth? That's a crucial part. Generally, like, we can't say that, you come and sit and do these activities. Without giving any kind of benefits. We should give benefits to the children and youth. For children, we can give like appreciations and then encouragement. For youths, that is a majorly monetary benefits. Monetary benefits will attract the youth of the community. With this approach, we can have a successful ecosystem-based adaptation strategies within our ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, I think it's very important that we bring in children and youth into this, because that's where it all starts up. And it's equally important to take this into the realm of formal educational processes. How do we get our textbooks remodified? Do the textbooks sufficiently talk about adaptation and mitigation? How are we going to address this? At what class we are going to address this? These are the important things that we'll have to deal with. Our last expert is Saurabh. And Saurabh, I'd like you to really think of the gaps that have emerged from these first 4 presentations and talk about what your approach would be to adaptation to climate change. Right?
Actually, as Amit also said, that we need a catalyst for doing some ecosystem-based adaptation or related activities. So here the resilient income, because income can act as a catalyst for any conservation program to to move on. So here I want to discuss the ways in which EBA it contributes in providing resilient income in the rural landscape. At first, there is EBA provides the diversification of livelihood, and Nitin sir already mentioned the bamboo, and can serve as a very important component of diversification of livelihood. And another thing is apiculture can also serve as a very good nature-based solution, which can increase the income of the farmers or the forest-dependent people. And in water, we are promoting these 2 activities, like bamboo product-based livelihood and the apiculture-based livelihood, for sustaining the incomes of the villager. Secondly, the ecotourism opportunities. It is a very critical component of EBA, and because since rural landscapes has a very good and very breathtaking sceneries or places, and people from the urban area like to go to these places to connect with the nature. So in the Purushwadi village in Akole, Water has initiated a program with the support of grassroots organization, and they have initiated a Firefly Festival, and it increases boost the rural economy through the accommodation, through the sale of the handicrafts and other components. So ecotourism can play a very important role in boosting the economy as well as conservation of the environment also. Thirdly, I want to say the promotion of wild edible plants. In Maharashtra, we have a Ran Bhaji festival, where the traditional food items of the tribal people, they are encouraged. And a lot of tourists go to see the traditional recipes. And it is another very important component to protect the indigenous traditional knowledge of the tribal people also. And people also buy the traditional products, like boosting the economy of the people. And fourth is the community based natural resource management. Actually, the programs like People Biodiversity Register, it not only documented the traditional knowledge of the local people, but also gives the ownership to them. So by giving the ownership, they are more aware to protecting their, the natural ecosystem. And also it contributes to the access to benefit sharing and component. And apart from that, there are other practices which are, the biodiversity and ecosystem services component is not directly related, but it contributes much, like sustainable agriculture practices, water resource management, etc. So I can say that in short, the EBA is a pathway to resilience, a roadmap to secure income, and a commitment to a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurabh. And I must say you have managed to fill up the gaps which were there, and that's very good. And I think something very close to what you're saying will emerge from what we are trying to do in terms of livelihoods. And I think that's a very important component of this. So I think with that, this first panel is more or less through. So Arjuna, would you like to take over from here?
Yes. No, I think these discussions were like really useful because they gave a broader context of where the initiatives such as the carbon credit mechanism or the ABS or the trade related to biodiversity resources that earlier presenters had spoken about, the broader context in which these interventions are happening. And I think while we are trying to find solutions, while practitioners are trying to make things work for the community, it's very important to look at this broader context because we don't want to lock ourselves into a trajectory of maladaptation and then no return in the future. So I think that's where the inputs from all the experts, the fact that to look at the forests more holistically, to look at the community, to look at capacity building, the education, and all becomes even more important. So I think that's a very great perspective to bring into the discussion. But at this point, I think we should go back to the practitioners and see what they felt coming out of these perspectives from the experts. There are also a couple of questions that have come in to the Q&A box, some interesting ones from Dr. Rabindranath Pati, from Dr. Ishwar Kale, and others. Dr. Bharucha, you might also have some questions that you want to perhaps throw back to the to each of the case study presenters. That would also be welcome. Yeah. I would perhaps hand it back to you, Dr. Bharucha. Sure. If there is to begin with, if there is any question that you had for the case study presenters. Yes. As an alternate, and simultaneously, Skand is going to write down some questions and call upon a few of the audience to even ask a few questions.
Thank you, Arjuna, and for calling me back for the second part of this, which I think is very, very important. So I would like to ask Kritika, how have carbon markets really assured biodiversity conservation from happening, which will be related to adapting to climate change? I mean, as a very focused point of view, how do we do this? So you have your carbon markets coming out, you're getting sequestration happening. How is that related to biodiversity? How is it related to biodiversity monitoring? Where is that link that you can establish?
Hi, Dr. Bharucha. Great question. So typically what we're seeing in the carbon markets is that there is a much higher price paid for projects that have a biodiversity focus than for projects that are, say, plantations of only teak or eucalyptus or things like that. So what we're seeing from buyers is a desire to want to have projects that are more biodiverse. Mm-hmm. Where we're actually getting stuck on the ground is that the desire from farmers to plant biodiversely is much lower. Because the biggest problem that a farmer faces is that as a farmer, if I have one crop on my land, it's so much easier for me to find a market and negotiate those prices. But if I'm growing now like 3 or 4 different things, or in some cases 10 to 15 different crops, my biggest challenge is now I have to find multiple markets.
Yes.
So one of the things that we're now trying to do, again supported through carbon finance and philanthropic efforts, is to guarantee this market for farmers. So just to give you an example, Bale, which is such an important tree in Maharashtra, it's in part of Ayurveda, all of these things, is now on the IUCN Red List. So we've been consistently trying to encourage farmers to plant Bale, but the answer that we get is where will I sell it? What will I do with it? So what carbon markets can then also help finance is some of these things like creating these sustainable supply chains, creating the finance needed to establish some of these markets, and also pay premium prices to farmers for doing this.
Thanks.
Probably, can I interject?
Please.
Probably one answer to that could be through the mandatory market. The voluntary
market.
That could be the answer to the issue that you are speaking about. Because there you would not be much more concerned about the returns. If it comes from the voluntary market, maybe we could look at that.
Probably better.
Absolutely.
Right. I have a question for Amit, actually. Amit, you spoke of people's biodiversity registers and getting into this ABS phenomena. And that's always been a bit of a bug, because when you look at those things in terms of ABS, we're looking at something about sustainable use. Are we really focusing enough on the conservation aspect of biodiversity? Again, it's a question of link ups. Are we going to talk about ABS as something that will create sustainable use, or are we thinking of ABS which should eventually lead to consumption of biological diversity?
Sir, in the core, if we talk about only conservation, there won't be any trade. Honestly, there won't be any trade. But if we talk about the sustainability and keeping or maintaining that balance in between the conservation and in between the livelihood, then it can be happened. And for that, we are striving very hard and very passionately with the communities. And fortunately, in the area where I have worked, the communities are basically the जिन्हें हम कह सकते हैं कि वो निसर्ग पूजक है. They worship the nature. They know the importance of every single species with them. So very rarely we have seen that they have underwent any regressive or hazardous or nature deploying practices. So I can ensure on my side that where I have worked, the communities are cautious, and yes, we are attaining a proper balance between the conservation and sustainable utilization of it.
Thanks. Thank you. That's a super answer. And I think it is that balance which has to be looked at now.
Yes.
Otherwise, it will always tip on the side of how I can use something and how I can use something more. So thank you very much. But that's the right answer. And that, I think, must come from what Kranti was saying about SEPA and how communication, education, public awareness actually can work towards this. Finally, to come to Sanjay, I don't know whether Sanjay was there when I came and visited your center in Hyderabad in 2020. Was it 2020 or 2021? I'm not quite sure now. That was this pre-COVID or COVID period starting off and whatever. So I've been to your place. Now I want to know from you, what changed since then? You got the award, and what brought you into that award system, and how that award actually encouraged you to do something more. Because I remember your participants coming and sitting around, and the village folk coming and sitting around. And actually, it became more a sort of a capacity building thing than a finding out thing. And so where do you think you've gone from that period of time to 2023?
Dr. Bharucha, I think there's been an interruption on the internet on their side. I got a message saying that
I'm so sorry.
No, it just happened. I mean, as you were speaking, I think they just dropped off the call. But we'll get them back. I think that for that question. Perhaps
later.
Yes, we'll come back to them later, maybe.
Yeah.
We also have an interesting question from Mr. Dr. Rabindranath Pati, who is in the attendees. Like, we would be happy, Dr. Pati, if you are online to get you on camera to ask your question to Kritika or Amit or any of the other experts over here. Zahir, can you upgrade Dr. Pati?
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Rabindranath Pati. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Professor Rabindranath Pati from Odisha. Our team has been working in Chilika wetland for last 10 years. So there we have already documented people's biodiversity register for 36 villages. So I would like to share something with you. The farmers, they do good work. They are involved in sheep harvesting, mud carp harvesting, cottage harvesting, pisciculture, and they destroy, mangrove forest of the area because they make charcoals. They convert mangrove forest into their agricultural land. Okay, their unsustainable harvesting practice also kill juvenile shrimps that are used as food by other species, and they also catch adult tortoise. They're also fishing by their net, and this torture also kill and they sell it in the local market. And they are danger. They pose threat to aqua biodiversity of Chilika region. Okay, so what I wanted to share with you, ecotourism, all are talking about ecotourism projects. But what we find, ecotourism projects is taken by some NGOs and business people. And there is insignificant role of local community that don't get any benefit from the ecotourism projects. And what happens? There is urgent need for participatory conservation approach involving local communities. That is only possible if we will honor their local values, their local cultures, because they worship local deities there. They have their own perception, they have their own world view. They always honor nature. They perform different rituals and festivals in which they believe that tangible and intangible objects are the gift of supernatural power, for which they organize different festivals. And we have to, through that, different communities, Muslims, Hindus, tribals, they work together and they maintain harmonious relations among themselves and with nature. And secondly, I want to share with one question with Dr. Amit Setias. He has presented very nicely. But what we find, the biodiversity board is not that functional in our state here. Because whatever committees, National Biodiversity Board has already earmarked, provided some agenda, but these units are not functional. And we followed the model of Dr. Gadgil, and we involved local healers as local botanists who are knowledgeable persons. We made task force among them, and in 36 villages we have already documented people's biodiversity register. But after 3 years, we find that registers are not properly maintained and updated. And district collector and but the Maharashtra, they are doing well, but in our state it is ineffective. The officers, they don't work properly. I don't say negative things. This is the grassroots reality. This is my concern. Okay.
True, sir. True. The case in Maharashtra is not very different because since past 1.5 years, the board doesn't exist in Maharashtra. Since the government has changed, the board doesn't exist. But anyways, the thing is, it is people's driven. It is people's. So we need to take our work. It is our duty. It is our responsibility, as the article, Indian Constitution, Article 50 says, we must conserve our biodiversity. It's our prime responsibility. We should take the charge. The things will happen. Let's be optimistic. Things will happen positively in a more or in a lesser or later time. The things will go on. We need to keep going.
Right. Yeah. Amit, thank you. I just about also like to remind all our other participants who are there online that if you have any questions to ask any of the panelists, the experts, please drop your questions into the Q&A box. And Skand, my colleague, is there to look at your questions and pick it up. So that questions are most welcome. There is another question to Kritika here from Rabindranath, which she has marked as she would like to answer. It's about how do you orient the illiterate farmers on estimating, accounting for things like the carbon inventory and voluntary market. And this probably also comes back to the capacity building question.
Yeah, sorry, I actually already answered that. I pressed the button by mistake. So I answered this from the other. I already answered that question in the chat. But happy to answer.
But yeah, I mean, if there are any key points that you want to refer to that, I mean, just for the, you can go on.
Yeah, so I think it was a great question because I think informing farmers and making sure that their participation in the program is voluntary and that they have all of the information is a very important aspect. So we've developed a lot of materials, including videos, pamphlets, etc., because we'd get like really cute questions from farmers. So, things like, if we sell carbon, does that mean like they are going to take away our oxygen and things like that? So we also created like a list of FAQs and also demonstrated, I think, for what was important is to explain the concept, because it's a fairly abstract concept and, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to farmers immediately. We used a lot of metaphors as well to explain how this would work. Like if the way you sell bamboo, you can sell carbon in a similar way, things like that. So if anybody needs that material, I've put my email ID in the answer and happy to share that material.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that's great.
I have a question. Sorry, I have a question for Kritika. Kritika, you are working with farmers who voluntarily come to you.
Right.
You said in about with 1,000 farmers, am I right? In Maharashtra, let me take in different districts. The question I have over here is, while working with individual farmers, what happens to the impact of the land or the biodiversity in the neighboring lands? Because when I understand from the way we work is, one needs a landscape approach. If we are looking at sustainability of the ecosystems, the ecosystem services, how do you think that needs to be addressed? Or what would you say would be some things you need to look at?
Right. No, I think that's a great question. What happens is, because this program is voluntary, often getting all the farmers on board in the village in the early years is harder. But what we've noticed is that when we are creating a plan, for example, for what species need to be done, etc., that plan is done at a landscape level. But the way we've seen farmers enter the program is more in a phased manner. So you typically have your more progressive, risk-taking farmers come in the earlier years. And then once you have other farmers who see that, okay, my neighbor did it and nothing bad happened to her and she got the money and she got the support, and we're able to then get other farmers into the program. So this is happening in a phased manner. So we estimate that, say, in the next 7 or so years, in all of the villages that we're working on, we should have at least 70 to 80% saturation. So that all of your services, all of your ecological benefits are then seen at a broader level.
Well, thank you. This is a question I think that all of us also revisit and struggle, because what happens with nature, nature doesn't respect anyone, it attacks all. And we are talking about climate change, and that's a challenge. I wouldn't ask you to respond now, but it's a question that we need to think about,
Absolutely.
Any other question?
Yeah, I had a question for Dr. Amit. I mean, I think Dr. Amit, you spoke a little bit about the legal framework related to the biodiversity provisions. And so I just wanted your thoughts on to what extent do you think some of the more recent amendments, are they progressive? Do they help? Are they in favor of the local communities? Or what other where is there room for advocacy to bring about changes that can really support local communities? What are your thoughts about that?
Too much changes are to be needed on the ground level. Too much work is to be done on the ground level, but the thing is, there is say a kind of a lack of leadership, a lack of kind of vision towards the particular sector is lacking from the government side. But I see to my perceptions. And secondly, as we have seen earlier, the thing biodiversity directly correlated with the areas where there is forest, where there is a rich natural bioresources, and not with the grassland. As in some presentations we have seen, in Dr. Bharucha's presentation, we have seen that they treat that land as a wasteland, and they do not treat that land as an ecosystem. So if that happens, then the things will change. So I think there is a lot of work and amendments are to be needed on the legal frame of the on this aspect.
Well, I have a small comment on this really. One is to look at the changes in the Act themselves and look at what policy change is happening at this current period of time, which is going to happen. I mean, you can't remain static on this. They'll change. Some of them will get better, and better for us or better for someone else. But the basic thing is also looking at the multi-sectoral linkages that are there in administrative setups. And that's where the problem arises, that there is very little communication between the forest department and the animal husbandry, and the animal husbandry with even agriculture, which is part of them. And these linkages, when we did the Maharashtra State Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan, this is where we found huge disparities at the administrative level, not individually for that administrative capacity, but for the linkages that were between them. So therefore, you were saying that, well, we don't want tilapia in, but the fisheries department was saying we want tilapia. So that is where I think is the next thing. So one is at the policy level. The other is with this intersectoral management that needs to happen, which is really very complex. We had huge debates about how to go about doing this, and I'm sure we are moving towards that now, and obviously that's happening. The forest department now does not seem to look at only forest. They say, yeah, we also need to look at wetlands. We also need to look at grasslands. So I think that is emerging now, and as that emerges better and gets stronger, you will get better management as a holistic sort of approach to natural resource and biodiversity.
Right. So I think maybe we can turn it to see if Mr. Nitin, Subhash, or Dr. Kranti have any final comments. And then we'll hand it back to you, Dr. Bharucha, to sum up.
Yes, just one or two maybe comments or suggestions. One is Dr. Setia, you can probably look, you were talking about laws, laws which are contradictory to each other. Maybe there is one book by Dr. H.S. Pabla, which the book is entitled Laws at War. Although it doesn't speak about all the laws, but it talks among the Forest Conservation Act, the Wildlife Protection Act. So it talks about how the laws are contradictory to each other. But we need to look at it from the point of view of finding out solutions as to why this issue has come up. Another comment about Kritika's issue is that in the department we were trying to do this tree credit. We were just like carbon credits. We were trying to introduce something called the tree credit. And how do we go about it? And as you rightly pointed out, the major issue there was monitoring. And as you said, satellite-based monitoring is a possibility. Drone-based monitoring is a possibility. But that was a major issue that was coming up. The other issue that was coming up there was we were talking about giving or giving carbon credit to new plantation. But what about the existing trees? Right? Districts like Gadchiroli, Gondia, Chandrapur, they are existing trees. Why not think about issuing tree credits for protecting the existing trees? So that could be a very, very big incentive for the people to maintain the trees that are already there. We need to work out solutions on that aspect. Then about Val Agro, you're really putting microbes to work probably. And I always, and somebody has already pointed it out, what is the incentive that you are looking at from the policymakers when somebody like you takes proactive action for doing the work that you have done? So what could be there apart from the awards and other things? You've already received an award, but I think we should also question the policymakers as to what awards could be, not awards, but what incentives could be given for such some tax holidays or something of that sort, because then only the private entrepreneur could get into all this. So this is, I think this is what I had to say. Thank you.
Yeah,
it has been a very enlightening experience for me.
I think for all of us, because there are more gaps in the information and data.
Yeah, I just had to say that a good communication, good education and program would really help in, successful thing to go ahead, in which you need to include, I feel, is, ecosystems importance and, the services which ecosystems provide. So the whole biodiversity conservation of an area is as much important as finance, which also needs to be taught to the farmer through the education program. I think that should be included in any of the programs which you do. Yeah, that's all.
So any other questions there, or shall I sort of wind up this panel?
About Kritika's presentation, she has mentioned that 50 trees is equal to 1 ton of carbon per year. Suppose a person planted on his farm 50 trees or 100 trees, how much money he will get per year?
So that was a rough approximation, sir, which is that one tree sequesters about 20 kilograms of carbon dioxide a year. But if you really look at the carbon sequestration, it's sort of like a bell curve, which then doesn't go down, but sort of peters out. So you'll get maximum carbon sequestration around year 10 to 12. And then it kind of maintains a steady level after that for the rest of the tree. So in most projects, what we're seeing is that per hectare, if you're planting around 370 trees, you're getting carbon sequestration of between 16 to 20 tons per year. So for simplicity's sake, if we assume 20 tons, and on an average, if it's a high quality project, it should not be too difficult to get about $20 a ton. So on an average, you can expect about $400 a hectare, which will work out to about, depending on the exchange rate, about roughly 32,000 rupees per hectare per year. But from this, so essentially we transfer 70% to the farmer and 30% is kept to cover all of the audit costs. Because every time you issue credits, you also need to have an auditor come check everything. You also pay the carbon standard, things like that. So 70% of that. So on an average, it would work out to about 8,000 rupees or so per acre, between 6,000 to 8,000 rupees per acre. If your price is $20, of course, if prices increase in the future, then that number will go up.
Have they specified the tree species? Because the tree species which will grow in the Konkan region, it will grow fast. and which will grow in the drought-prone area. It will grow very slow because of lack of moisture.
Right. Absolutely. So typically so for example, temperate forests and things like that, you have very slow growing species. So in a lot of the cases, what people are doing is that they are buying credits in advance. So a company will buy, let's say, 30 years of credits. You estimate you've planted so many trees. You estimate a survival rate, and then you purchase 30 years of credits sometimes in advance, so that a lot of that money can be given to farmers upfront. But the biggest thing is, if you're purchasing credits in advance, then you're also selling those credits at a discounted rate, because the buyer is taking on a lot of the risk of whether these trees will actually survive for 30 years or not. Which is why most people are preferring, from a buyer perspective, preferring bamboo. Because bamboo, you're achieving very good carbon sequestration in 7 or 8 years. And the additional very unique thing about bamboo is that if you harvest it properly, I think Sir was talking about the bamboo harvesting method, the overall carbon sequestration from the bamboo actually increases over the life of the project from harvesting it. So bamboo is a general preference across
two small related questions. Depending on the ecosystem or the biogeographic zone in which you are, how do you select the right species?
Yeah.
And if you're looking at 10 to 12 years, which is a fairly long period of time, is there some way to shorten this period, but also keep its biodiversity conservation perspective going? Because if you're just going to grow something which grows fast and gives a fast return, you're probably going to negate its biodiversity conservation potential. So I'm very concerned about that kind of a thinking, that the faster you grow, the better it is. But it doesn't look at the biodiversity, nor does it look at adaptation to climate. So I think that is something that has to be factored into this. And I think that's something that we need to think about much more seriously in the future in terms of looking at carbon credits.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. And I think just one point to add here is, because in our initial years when we started, we worked very closely with the Botanical Survey of India and ensured species selection and all of that. But what we're finding, like I said earlier, is that species selection is driven more by communities and farmers rather than by buyers. Because from a community or farmer perspective, they don't really understand the carbon market or think that, they will consistently get carbon revenue. They look at species from the point of view of, is this species going to give me agroforestry produce? So can I sell the tamarind? Can I sell the mango? Can I sell the bamboo? Can I sell the custard apple? So a lot of the species selection is actually driven by the landowners, because the other thing is, if the landowners are not on board with the species selection, they will just cut off the trees in 2 or 3 years. So that's where, like, balancing the preferences of the landowners with biodiversity, with ecological conservation, with finance, I think plays an important role.
Yeah, very, very much so. And this is where what Dr. Kranti was talking about. How do we use SEPA much more effectively to see that this aspect is also looked at? And that's going to be a very complicated affair. And
the Green Credit Program of Indian government, now they are giving the species list based on the rainfall.
Based on the rainfall, they made species list. So that's something which is coming up, right? Thank you. I do a small wrap up first, and then you come on. Or how do you want to do it?
You do it first.
Okay, I do it first. Well, I think it's been very exciting. All the 3 presentations, but plus all the 5 comments that came in from different angles, which I think has to get into some sort of a much more formalized think tank, where we take all these people who came for this presentation as a sort of starter in where we want to go. And I think that is what we want to do. Where do we want to go from here in terms of adaptation to climate change, which I think is so critical now? I think many people, at least outside the room here, do not really necessarily think that it's a critical issue. And that if we don't attend to it now, it's just going to get phenomenally worse. It's going to grow at a the impacts that are going to come through are going to get worse every day. And I think that is where this particular startup sort of seminar or startup sort of little workshop like thing that happened out of this webinar, I think becomes so critically important. And we want many more participants in this whole activity to be able to say where we want to go. So I think that's what I would like to comment on. I don't have too much more to say, but it's been very fascinating for me and a learning experience for me, which I thought I must thank ECOBARI for having brought up this, having thought of doing something like this, which I think will have a lot of potential to grow. Thank you very much for having me here.
So rather than say in conclusion, I would say in going forward from today, this is how actually I look at this session. As Nitin mentioned, I think this session has raised for me a lot of questions. And I realize also that in our whole interaction, the importance of raising questions, allowing questions to surface, listening to questions, rather than jumping straight away to solutions. So this whole event has been a very rich event. It has brought together the different perspectives that we need to look at. While we looked at biodiversity, I think in the type of way we are looking at it, we are looking at it from an ecosystem way. The strengths of the different partners and looking at this whole thing, if we have to go forward, and if we have to think of our own sustainability in the time to come, we have to flow with nature. There is no way. Because whenever humans interfere, we'll always raise other problems a little later. So if we flow with nature, that's the best way. The question would be the key questions that I have that come out with it is, in whatever we do, how do we conserve the natural ecosystems from whatever context it is in? We can't go back to the original, but how do we conserve the natural ecosystems and the biodiversity that is in that? And within a watershed, I would say, you have different types of ecosystems. The grassland ecosystems, the forests, the riverine, the spring sheds, you have the drylands, you have different ecosystems. How do we look at the works we do as practitioners, as donors who are contributing to supporting it, as academicians and scientists who are from different perspectives coming in, and the supporters. So how do we look at conserving the natural ecosystems and the respective biodiversity, considering the future? How do we look at these and the interventions done while we address climate change? We can't change the climate. We have to now keep adapting and adapting and keep observing what is happening to the ecosystem and then see what can be done to sustain while we adapt it. And at the same time, we will not be able to do it unless we ask the question, how does it bring resilient incomes, not just to us outside, but back to the community? And if we look at the tourism, how do we look at tourism that brings back ecosystems to the community, income to the community, not just for outsiders? How can the tourism support the protection rather than taking our garbage and our waste and the waste right to the ecosystem, to the clean environment and dumping it there? I think there are lots of factors we need to think at. And what comes to me as one of the first slides that Skan showed on what is ECOBARI? Who is ECOBARI? ECOBARI is bringing the different partners together. We cannot do anything alone. We need to come together with the strengths of the different partners, and there we have working together for the community to go forward. And so this is what I would say. This is just a trigger. Today for me, when I listen to all the to the presenters who had come in, to the experts over here, and to this whole dialogue, I say, we are just beginning. And I would like to look at this event as the trigger to go forward, where different partners look at strengthening the different areas, working together, so that gradually we've got a short time actually before we start facing more and more climate risks. So we need to work out quickly to see how can we sustain ourselves and the future generations. So thank you very much. And we look forward to a continued interaction and relationship as we work towards sustainability.
Thank you, everyone. Dr. Bharucha, Dr. Amit, Kritika, friends from Valagro, all the other experts in the room here, Nitin, Subhash, Dr. Kranti, Marcella, Imran, Saurabh.
And all the participants. I don't know
all the participants. Yeah, there's still about 50 still left with us.
47 left. That's good. Thank you so much. And we'd
thank
like
you everyone for joining.
Yeah, thank all of you for being here.
We have posted a few links if you want to stay in touch with ECOBARI, how you can do so. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, probably in January, 2 months' time.
Have we taken a group photo?
I think many screenshots have been taken by our colleagues.
But if not, we can request all the participants to turn on their webcam, and then we can have a group photo. Because at the end, we used to do that, na?
True.
Good idea.
Good idea.
Because in webinar mode, I think the only panelists have the option of putting the thing on. But Kritika, are you still there online? Yeah, maybe we can still do a group photo with the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yes, Kan, you can take a screenshot. Let us know when it's done.
Yeah, I've taken on that. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
All the participants, thank you.
Thank you. Some rich